So welcome to the second session this afternoon. And the theme of the session is climate change, adaptation, and community disaster resilience. We will share lessons from CCA project in Asia. We have a keynote speaker, Professor John Twigg, honorary professor from University College London. Are you online? You're there?
I am. I'm here.
Where I cannot see you. Where are you? Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Now I can see you.
Okay, I can't see you, but anyway, it doesn't matter.
Yeah. So please welcome him with a big round of applause. Yeah, Professor John Twigg. So you will talk about the building resilience, right?
I will. Yes.
Okay. Right. Please get started.
Okay. Well, first of all, thank you for inviting me to take part in this symposium and to explore together this really complex but important issue about building resilient communities. The presentation I'm giving is based partly on academic research, partly based on community-based initiatives, and partly on a project and a methodology called the Characteristics of a Disaster Resilient Community. Now, the idea of community is central to all sorts of thinking about disaster risk reduction. But formal disaster management agencies often undervalue other forms of social organization in crises. So that could be community-based organizations, it could be voluntary groups, it could be informal social groups, or it could even be families and extended families. And formal authorities often aren't a little bit uncomfortable with spontaneous response and recovery actions by affected communities, partly because they're not under official control. There are two sort of major myths or assumptions which one needs to challenge when talking about resilient communities and community responses in disasters. One is the notion that actually law and order breaks down during disasters and disasters stimulate panic. There's an enormous amount of evidence from around the world now to show that that is not the norm, that actually people collaborate and work together to deal with the urgent needs that emerge in disasters. We have a lot of talk on the news media about looting, for example, in disasters, and again, it does happen, but it's not typical of what actually takes place in those kind of events. And it's really disappointing in a sense that the news media take that line when we've got years, even decades of research into community-based approaches. And that's identified the capacities and potential of all sorts of communities, formal and informal, and their activity and energy and roles in disaster response and recovery. So perhaps we also have to unpick this idea of what a community is in these sort of informal settings. The term is, we use the term a lot, we use it loosely, we use it inconsistently, and we probably need to think a little bit more about what it means in disaster, risk, and hazard contexts. So what I've been invited to kind of talk about today, as briefly as possible, I guess, by the way, do hurry me up if you think I'm being too slow. I'm looking at communities and disasters through the context of resilience. And I think to focus this, rather than to get involved in all sorts of broad and interesting and fascinating, but not necessarily specific and focused discussions about disaster resilience, I want to talk about one particular learning journey, which was initiated by a group of international NGOs based primarily in the UK, who tried to develop and apply tools for disaster risk reduction planning, research and analysis, find out something that would actually be useful to practitioners on the ground. And the central part of this was a piece of guidance for both practitioners and policymakers, and it was called the Characteristics of a Disaster Resilient Community. This was innovative, but it was also taking a risk because we hadn't tried this approach before. We hadn't tried it theoretically, and we hadn't tried it really in practice. what emerged from the process was the characteristics of a disaster resilient community, which I'll call the characteristics from now on because that's a bit quicker. And that's a resource and guidance note for all kinds of organizations working on disaster risk reduction and climate change adaptation initiatives, particularly at subnational and local levels and in partnership with communities. The original idea, and this is going back a long way now, the original publication was in 2007 by a group of international NGOs based in the UK. And we produced the second version in 2009 in English, Spanish, French, and Bahasa. And we field tested the first iteration of the characteristics in different locations, and then we revisited the original plans and the original ideas and the processes to see whether the theory and the practice fitted together. So we had a resource at the end of this that was aimed at potentially a wide range of users and practitioners. It's generally applied for project and program planners and managers, much more than for policymakers. It's also aimed at academics. Academics use the model quite a lot. And it identifies different elements of resilience. It tells us something of what a disaster resilient community might look like. And it provides ideas to potential users about how to make further progress. And the idea is that users don't have to read pages and pages and pages of manuals. It's that they can quickly and easily select the information and ideas that they need from the resource in order to support their own needs. And that, in doing so, that increases communities' capacities. We decided very categorically that we didn't want a manual in the conventional sense. We wanted a resource. A resource can be used and adapted in different ways to explore ideas, stimulate discussion amongst different groups of stakeholders. And it seems a lot of users as well as a lot of researchers want to acknowledge the value of adaptation and modification and flexibility in this kind of context. So that was back in 2007 when we worked on that originally, or started it off. Now there's a lot of practitioner interest in DRR frameworks, DRR toolkits, and all sorts, a lot of which draw on the characteristics publication, but also on other publications and experiences too. International NGOs, for example, have been quite keen on this. If anyone's seen Goals ARC-D toolkit, which has, I think, 30 resilience components related to 8 critical systems, you can see the kind of take-up and the kind of depth and breadth that is involved in these processes. How did this particular approach come about and what's its perceived value? Well, we're not entirely sure when it started. It was a long time ago, I have to say. But it arose, it became visible in the early 2000s, I think. And the stimulus for this, and this may be something we want to think about going forward, the stimulus for this was really the Hyogo Framework for Action, which was launched by the UN in 2005. That was the global blueprint for DRR efforts, and it was a major driving force in policy and practice. It was important in developing institutions, policies, and legislation. And it stimulated national and local efforts and helped to strengthen cooperation internationally as well. So the various policies, strategies, and plans. And there was more interest in harmonizing strategies as well. And a key player at that time was a group which I don't think exists anymore, and certainly not talked about, called the Prevention Consortium, which was created in 2000 and hosted by the World Bank and then subsequently by the IFRC. And that provided a forum to discuss and debate and stimulate new ideas on disaster risk reduction and more collaborations. And it helped to broker links between different actors. It included humanitarian agencies, development agencies, national governments, UN organizations, the Red Cross movement, academia, civil society, private sector even. So prevention took a particular interest in harmonizing strategies and approaches. So rather than just everybody going their own way and developing their own tools and methods, and then you end up with a lot of diversity, but not a lot of coherence, perhaps. But we were also, I was involved in this as part of the program. We were trying to explore and develop tools that were particularly relevant for programming, for disaster risk reduction programming, for mitigation programming, and so on. And we came out with a set of methodologies for assessing risks and the benefits of mitigation. We had an initiative which explored different tools for mainstreaming DRR, and that looked at quite a wide range of methods and issues. So we looked at project cycle management, programming, economic and environmental appraisals, vulnerability analysis, sustainable livelihoods approaches, social impact and health impact assessment, logical frameworks, and so on. It was very wide ranging. At the same time, and I'm still talking historically about this, the UK government was taking a bigger interest in actually supporting work that we were debating in the NGO sector about what a disaster resilient community ought to look like and how we'd develop indicators to assess this. And the output of that was the comprehensive, multi-hazard, multi-context set of resilience characteristics, which was published in 2007. That is a long time ago, I admit. And it's published as Characteristics of a Disaster Resilient Community, the guidance note. And that was widely publicized and shared by different agencies because there was a demand for it. Nobody had written anything like that before. Nothing had been available quite like that before. So it was an opportunity all round. Doing it on paper was pretty challenging. Doing field testing it was even more challenging in some ways. Agencies were invited to pilot and give feedback, and that was really, really helpful. It meant that we could have a process rather than having to make sort of one-off decisions. And the progress was pretty quick, actually. The first version, based on a desk review, emerged in 2007. And feedback was, it was in quote in the report, was almost overwhelming. But we didn't have much framework or structure available for understanding the HFA's impact at the grassroots at that stage. And we had to expand and revise the characteristics as one does when you actually hit the field and hit reality. So we field tested the original guidance, which was published a couple of years later. And since then, it's been adopted or adapted by relief and development NGOs and agencies all around the world. So that they include Caribbean Disaster Emergency Management Agency, SEDEMA, the international NGO GOAL, which is based in Ireland. And its characteristics is still a key reference on community resilience. And other organizations involved include Arab International Development and IFRC, who produced their own publication, Characteristics of a Safe and Resilient Community. That was in 2011. So what we have in this, I won't say it's a final output because I don't know if we'll ever review it or renew it or revise it again. But it's based on a set of tables setting out different characteristics, and the characteristics are set out under different thematic headings, and they represent the main potential areas of DRR intervention based kind of historically, if you like, on the Hyogo framework. We have 5 thematic areas, which are quite broad, 28 components of resilience, which are a bit more specific, and then 167 individual characteristics potential characteristics of a resilient community. Don't panic. I mean, the process of selecting and arranging characteristics does not involve looking at all 167 of them. It's a basis for conversation. It's for users to choose which characteristics are relevant to them and to different stakeholders, and to how you might want to join ideas or how you might want to elaborate upon them or modify them and so on. So the idea is to be really quite comprehensive. So you include governance, you include risk assessment, you include knowledge and education, such as public awareness and so on. And then a lot of action on the ground in terms of risk management, natural resource management, sustainable livelihoods, social protection, physical protection like structural and technical measures, financial instruments and so on, as well as a lot of standard disaster preparedness and response ideas, organizational capacities, coordination, early warning systems, contingency planning, etc., etc. So there was a lot of momentum there. The interesting question is always you've achieved all this, what does it mean in theory and practice? And particularly, and this is the bit which we often forget, especially if you're in academia like I am, what does that mean for poor and vulnerable communities? What does that mean for actual community resilience and community-based action? How do you follow that up? Is it just a one-off? You've produced all these tools and methods and ideas and processes and what have you. How do you make sure that that has an ongoing life and isn't simply a one-off? And I think we've all been part of really quite exciting projects which ended up as one-off projects and never really progressed beyond that. In the case of the characteristics, we actually did a follow-up fieldwork by, I think it was 5 agencies who'd been involved with fact-finding visits, workshops, and dialogues in different countries. And that was published in 2011, I think, as a learning review. And again, it just opened up space for reflection, for debate and discussion, and crucially for giving more voice to community members who might otherwise be marginalized or overlooked. We obviously tried to contribute to the evidence base in general, and the approach we used was peer review. So each of the agencies involved offered up lessons from their own work for discussion. So there was a lot of ongoing debate. We wanted to find out what worked well, what the challenges were, what issues were relevant, etc. And we reviewed a very large number of reports, case studies, research papers, etc. And we didn't hurry the process. I mean, that's often a problem for programs and projects in the field, that deadlines are so tight and budgets are so squeezed that you don't have time to identify and explore key themes and issues over time. You don't have time to modify. That's something which I think all of those who are involved in resilience and DRR programming need to be aware of. Interestingly, and I still think this is something that we perhaps don't highlight enough even now. The learning we got from these processes revealed that vulnerability and capacities analysis, VCA, is a really powerful catalyst and tool and process for revealing and exploring and addressing power relationships in DRR programs. And the more participatory that VCA process is, the more empowering it was in different contexts. And it can be a key entry point for targeting interventions, mobilizing communities, supporting partnerships, even though creating and maintaining partnerships can be challenging in practice, especially if they're multidisciplinary. So I would, at this point, I would definitely make a renewed plug for the importance of vulnerabilities and capacities analysis, which is much more socially driven and people driven and community driven, and perhaps a bit less directed and controlled and managed by formal agencies. We also learned, I think, from these experiences that if you're going to support vulnerable and marginalized groups in risky and hazardous environments, you can't do that as a one-off action. It has to be a systematic process. Throughout a project, I wrote in my notes, but it's more than throughout a project. It's beyond the project. You have to design and develop and create collaborations and structures that are going to last and that are going to endure, and that's really, really important. We still tend to be much more prisoners of the project mentality. You do a project and it lasts for X months or X years or something like that, and then you move on to something else. This has to be something that's much more of a process and a movement, I think. And in particular, I think this is one thing we've all learned probably from our experiences, and I noticed that in the conversations yesterday. We need to pay much more attention to community structures and local power relationships, and to issues of inclusion and exclusion, to try and prevent certainly marginalization, or at least to mitigate it. So, and we need to remember that different stakeholders have different needs. They have different priorities. They have different urgencies, and we need in order to be credible with communities, we have to accept that. So we were quite clear at the end of this process, you can't just work through one-off interventions to ensure inclusion and participation. You have to have a systematic and ongoing approach. And that requires agencies and support agencies, big agencies and small ones, to look much more closely, much more systematically at the community structures and power relationships when addressing disasters, threats, and other risks. And we need to put more emphasis probably on facilitation rather than just implementation of projects. So all this knowledge and understanding, I think, is obviously very valuable. It probably raises more questions than it answers in some cases. We have this persistent question at the bottom of it all: what exactly is a community in different contexts? And that's almost an impossible question to answer properly, because every actor, every situation, every context is distinct, and so are the relationships between those different actors. And we all know that communities aren't single homogeneous entities. They can include very diverse interests, occupations, wealth, social status, ethnicity, etc., belief systems even. But a fundamental tenet of all of this should be to recognise the primary roles of local people and their communities as key actors in DRR. We need to remember communities are never static. They're flexible and they're adaptive. They adjust to all the changes and pressures and threats and opportunities that exist for them, even in challenging times of hardship. And community-based DRR keeps throwing up different questions and challenges to practitioners and researchers. Where and how do really fundamental issues of participation, inclusion, equality, accountability, and empowerment fit within DRR discourse? Does DRR discourse and do DRR actors pay enough attention to some of those, inclusion and empowerment issues? And how do we account for, or engage with, or embrace, or learn from other and newer issues, perhaps? I mean, intersectionality has now become a bit of a buzzword, I notice, and there is now work on intersectional approaches to vulnerability reduction and resilience building. Is that likely to be I mean, I think it's an important area to look at. Will it last, or is it just an agency or an academic interest? So I've probably given you far more questions than answers, and that's because I'm being honest. I think it's good to ask intelligent questions, even if you don't necessarily have the answers to hand. Collectively, we can provide answers to a lot of these questions. We've come a very long way in understanding what disaster risk reduction and resilience building mean in community context, but I believe there's still very much to be learned. I mean, I learned a lot in the presentations yesterday about DRR in community context, and I think the more we learn and share, the stronger we will be in being able to support resilient communities and other supporting agencies.
Okay,
and I think that's probably my time has run out.
Yeah,
so
right.
Thank you very much for listening to me.
Thank you so much, Professor John Twigg. Please thank Professor John Twigg with a round of applause. Well, next we have two invited speakers, and there's a small change in the order of the talks. First, Dr. Adriana Keating will present, and then Dr. Kantuan Vu will present later. So there is a small change, please keep in mind. And we'd like to invite the Dr. Adriana Keating. She will talk about what she learned and where she were heading to. And she worked with several collaborators, Professor Yoon Jong-yang and Chandra Son and Foam On. So please welcome her with a round of applause.
Thank you so much, Professor, for that wonderful introduction. So I am Dr. Adriana Keating from the International Institute for Applied Systems Analysis, which is based in Austria, but I'm currently based in Australia. Just a couple of letters difference there. And today I'm going to be talking about some work that I've been doing with some wonderful colleagues who are here today, Professor Yunjong Yang and my colleagues from Habitat for Humanity Cambodia, Sun Chantra and Om Phuon. They're the guys who've been doing the work on the ground. And Yun and I have been working with them in an action research project. Action research involves researchers working alongside practitioners. It means practice that is informed by research, but is also informing research. And that's some of the things I'm going to be reflecting on today. I think Professor Twigg raised a number of really important questions about disaster resilience and community and measurement. And the measurement framework that I'm going to be talking about today has been highly influenced by John's the characteristics of a disaster resilient community. So I wanted to acknowledge that as well. So I'll start by talking about the context of the project that we've been working in. I'll present some preliminary time series findings and learnings that we've had in applying this resilience measurement approach at 2 time steps in 3 communities. I'll talk about the ongoing actions being implemented by Habitat for Humanity Cambodia, and I'll reflect on the process and look forward to the next step in this research practitioner partnership. So the context of this project sits within what we call the CCA project, which is Enhancement of Climate Change Resilience and Income of Prek Long Community People in Cambodia. So this project runs for 3 years and is supported by the Community Chest of Korea via the Hankook University. And it's targeting 7 villages, approximately 2,500 households. And its objectives are to support community members to access safe and secure houses, safe and secure against climate change impacts, so we're looking at climate change adaptation, and for target groups to increase their income and income diversification, and all that coming together to support climate change adaptation. You've got a map there and a little picture taken by my colleague Professor Yang. Just to give you an idea about the context, these communities are located on along the river in the Battambang province of Cambodia. And the research element of the project is supported by the Korean NRF, and this is using the flood resilience measurement framework, flood resilience measurement for communities framework to assess community resilience in 3 of the 7 villages, and then use that information to inform the design of activities and to use it for advocacy, and then to take another measure down the road, which we've now passed that point as well, to see how resilience might have changed in the communities over the time period of the project. Again, here's some wonderful photos from Habitat for Humanity Cambodia, working with communities towards community disaster resilience. As you can see, we're talking about small villages in very rural area of Cambodia. They're primarily rice farmers and are highly exposed to flooding. So they've got a lot of experience and a lot of adaptations around flooding. That's one of the things that we discovered. As you can see, one of those houses there is on stilts. But with climate change increasing the frequency and severity of extreme weather events, together with urbanisation and infrastructure landscape changes, they're witnessing their risk is growing. So here are the 3 villages, Bak Amrek, Don Und and Bakrote. These are 3 of the 7 villages. We looked at all the villages and decided to select these because they were similar and because they were willing to work on this project. So that way we could do the assessment and see any differences in the impacts depending on the projects. This is the flood resilience measurement for communities, FRMC, resilience measurement framework that was used. As I said before, the original version of this was inspired by John's characteristics of disaster resilient community. That was back in 2013 when we designed the first version of the tool. It had 88 indicators. This version of the tool that we use here has a much more manageable 44 indicators of resilience. It has now been revised for a 3rd time, and the new version, I must say, has 52 indicators of resilience, but that's okay. The way we define community flood resilience, I think it's really important to go back to the foundations, because the way in which we define community flood resilience really drives the indicators that get included in a measurement framework. And so we define it here as the ability of a community to pursue its social, ecological and economic development and growth objectives while managing its flood risk over time in a mutually reinforcing way. That's a big mouthful. I could sit here for about 20 minutes unpacking that definition. But what it means is thriving in the face of flood risk, particularly flood risk that is increasing. So a community's development, however they define that, whatever their goals are, for communities, for households and for individuals, is not derailed by flooding, by ongoing flooding. So how it works is it's a fully integrated web-based mobile app system. The user, which in this case was Habitat for Humanity Cambodia, sits down and sets up the study. They allocate data collection to their field workers. The field workers go out with their mobile phones and they collect the data from household surveys, from focus group discussions with community, and from key informant interviews. Then all that data is sent back to the system, and then together we sat as a team, researchers and practitioners sitting together, and we looked at that data and we compared it to the indicators, which are called sources of resilience, and we assigned a grade from A to D for each of those indicators. So at the end of the process, what we had was 44 grades across the 44 indicators. But more importantly than that, the indicators are split into across the 5 capitals. So we're not just looking at economic indicators or physical capital indicators. We're looking at social capital. That's the biggest indicator group in the framework. We're looking at human capital, physical capital, yes, financial capital, and really importantly, natural capital. And so in this way, we can have all these different elements that we think are really important for strengthening community flood resilience, and we can compare them apples to apples. A lot of times we know that the social and governance aspects of resilience strengthening are really important, but from a donor perspective, they're really difficult to take a photo of. Am I running out of time?
No.
Okay. I thought, wow, I've really let it go here. From a donor perspective, it's really important that we can measure the intangible and the social and the human elements of community resilience right next to the tangible things that you can take a photo of, like a dike. The system supports the user to explore the data and analyse the results along different lenses. You can see here it produces graphs and helps the user explore the results, because if we're talking about a disaster resilience measurement framework that's being used by practitioners, they don't have the time, necessarily the expertise, to be doing in-depth analysis. So the more you can support that analysis and help them understand the results, the better. And here are the baseline results from the 3 villages. And as you can see, we have quite a lot of Cs and D grades, which is not to be, which is not unexpected considering the fact that we're looking at rural, poor communities in flood-prone Cambodia. The results don't differ too much, which is also not to be expected considering they're close to each other and they're quite similar demographically. But they do differ a little bit, and that's what I want to look at now. So here's the grade change from T0, the first time step, and T1, where we took the measure again for the village of Bak Amrek. What I want to highlight here is that social capital increased due to community participation in flood resilience actions led by the project, and also support for the commune level committee for disaster management from the project. So this is looking at the way in which what's happening at the village level is impacted by what's happening at the commune level, the importance of governance there. Physical capital also increased over the time period, which was not very much, just over a year. This is because Bak Amrek's a little bit closer to the town, and so its physical capital development was impacted by government decision making. So we need to be able to pick up the whole context of what's going on here, not just what's going on within one particular project. A new building of a secondary school was added, and in a flood-safe location, thankfully. Otherwise, physical capital resilience probably would have gone down. Financial capital declined in all three villages over the time period, and this was because more favourable loan conditions that had been made available during COVID were then withdrawn, and we actually picked that up in the data. So that was unfortunate. Bakrote, I want to highlight here that we have quite a strong increase in physical capital from the improvement of the early warning system due to the project, as well as some development due to government initiatives. In Don Und, we saw that human capital increased quite a lot over the short project period, as a result of disaster resilience training by the project with NRF support, as well as some government awareness campaigning. You know, some of the issues and some of the changes are similar right across the three villages, so I've just tried to highlight some interesting findings there. The ongoing local actions being implemented, we've got the community awareness campaign Clean Community to enhance the community's knowledge and contribute to behaviour change for sustainable natural resource management and waste management. Water filter distribution to enhance community drinking water always, but also in particular in the time of disasters and floods. Road renovation, I can't see that over there. I hope this one...
Yeah, have a few minutes.
Okay, I'll try and wrap up. Road renovation and boat rescue for flood emergency support to improve the emergency support and save lives during floods. Really, oftentimes we want to talk about deep systemic change and climate change adaptation. Yes, absolutely, that's what I'm all about. But we also have to meet people's immediate needs. And for these guys, it was about boats for flood protection, for flood emergency response. So, reflecting on some of John's questions, you know, I really feel that by using a standardised measure of resilience, we can generate these evidence-based insights about the strengths, the weaknesses, and the trends over time. Chatting with my Habitat for Humanity Cambodia colleagues, what they said was that the tool didn't necessarily highlight anything that they didn't know. They had a good sense, have been working with these communities for a long time, they have a good sense of what's going on. But what it does provide them with is an evidence-backed data source to say, these are the issues here. We've got a measurement framework that we can track, and they can use that for advocating with other donors, with local authorities and that kind of thing to get the other really important stakeholders on board And so I think that that's the use of a standardized measure is often has a lot of value in that sustainability of the program and getting other stakeholders on board that we often forget about. By using the measurement framework, we found evidence that the CCA project is substantially contributing to human and social capital. We generated insights regarding the financial, physical and natural capital conditions in the community. And I would conclude that action research projects and the use of resilience measurement frameworks enables a priority setting and impact evaluation for on-the-ground work. That's the primary benefit of it. But we also like to learn and continue to stand on the shoulders of giants. And so the research that is enabled by this kind of use in an on-the-ground project is invaluable for sharing with others and spreading knowledge and insights. So what's next? For the further small grants to encourage and support community-based initiatives, and tackling the challenges that inevitably come with any community-based project, particularly around ownership and sustainability of the impacts of the project and the outcomes of the project. Limited understanding within the project about the community's power relationships and cultural issues. That's something that we've talked about needing to explore in more depth as the research and as the action research deepens. And gaps in funds to support rigorous research capacities and evidence-based projects. This is something that I think we're all familiar with. And finally, scaling up the identified priorities, bringing in other stakeholders so that the community can experience deep systemic change and enhance its flood resilience. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yeah, with the limited time, we will proceed to the next invited talk. The next speaker is Dr. Con Vu. He's from ISAET Vietnam, and he will present regarding the community flood resilience. Yeah. Please welcome him with a big round of applause.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. Again, my name is Tuan from ISAET in Vietnam. ISAET is a non-profit organization working both on research and development. Our headquarters is in the US, and we have been working in Vietnam for almost 15 years now. So today I would like to share with you some of our reflection and insight based on our community flood resilient project in different communities in Vietnam. So basically we use the same framework at the FRMC framework at Adriana presented, but we approach the project a bit differently. So we are not going at a research project, but at a kind of combination between research project, DM planning, working with the local government, and also using the result for advocacy. And the main idea behind that is because we believe that we should try to find ways to combine between research, policy, and practices. That is, I think, also related to some point that we have we heard from the first presenter, but also from our second presenter. First, a bit about the context. In Vietnam, we are working in 12 communities, of which 7 are urban and peri-urban communities, and 5 are in the rural areas. And these communities are located in different parts of Vietnam, but mainly in the central coastal region and in the Mekong Delta. And for this project, we are working with different actors, not only local communities, but also local disaster risk management agencies, research organizations, but also even like urban planning organization or national government agencies. I'm not going to talk about the framework because we already heard in our second presentation. I'm going straight to the key findings. I'm not also talking about the specific and direct result from our project, but it's more about the finding and insight we get from the result, the assessment result in our project. So first, we found that our communities are facing with more and more frequent and unpredictable extreme events. And both the government and communities fail to address this kind of situation. They have a lot of experience dealing with flooding, but they often rely on historical information or historical trend to prepare for flooding. But now flooding is becoming more and more unusual. For example, in 2020, our communities in the central Vietnam had to deal with 5 consecutive flooding within a month. And it's not just about flooding, it's also about other hazards. And in the same year, some flooding just happened before some major typhoon. So how can the government and community prepare for that? Or like last year, some of our communities had to deal with big flood in the middle of the dry season. And everyone was surprised, both the government and communities. The other thing is that when people talk about disaster risk management, reduction, or climate change response, they often talk about the natural or climate aspect. But we found that they are much more than that. The risk and vulnerability to flooding of our communities are shaped not only by climate change or increase of rainfall, but sometimes even more by non-climate factors like urbanization, deforestation in the upstream area, or operation of upstream dam, especially in the Mekong Delta, or even when we talk about urbanization of urban communities, we have to deal with the problem of the depletion of natural capital. Like we are losing a lot of room for water, like a pond, lake, river, and canal are now filled up by soil to build new city or new urban areas. In the figure here, you can see the decreasing of natural area in one of our communities. That is the study we conducted a few years ago. And after 30 years, more than 70% of the natural area or green areas in the city lost. And then when it comes to the urban area, like in Vietnam, we are a very vulnerable countries to disaster and climate change. And so far, people often think that rural areas are more vulnerable. At the result, a lot of effort has been paid to rural area. But we found that urban and peri-urban area are increasingly vulnerable, and it has received limited attention. And the problem is not just about the concentration of people, economic activities, or expensive infrastructure, but also the people there. There are a number of groups in the urban context that are really vulnerable to climate change in general and to flooding in particular, like the informal group, for example. In big cities like Hanoi and Ho Chi Minh City, there are a lot of poor people coming from outside. They go there, but they receive nothing from the government. Even after major flooding, and they get a lot of damages, but they receive nothing because they are not registered at like urban resident. Or people are affected by problem with like suspended urbanization. In one of our communities, we found that 80% of households there living in a really poor housing condition. And the problem is not just because they don't have money. A number of them have money to upgrade or to build a new house, but they cannot do it because the whole community are located in the area planned for urbanization. And by law, they cannot do nothing. So they have to suffer from flood for more than 10 years now, and they cannot do nothing, anything. And actually, here is some example about the impact of non-climate factor. I don't have time to go deeper, but a lot of factors. So here's some example about the impact of urbanization or impact of land subsidence in the Mekong Delta. In some communities, the land subsidence rate is about 2 centimeters a year. So after 20 years, the community will lose like 40 centimeters. Or the problem with waste management, that also contribute to exacerbate flooding. And then, there's this example, the graphic here showing, the differences between rural and urban. The orange one is the capacity of the rural communities, and green one showing the capacity of urban communities. And surprisingly, the rural area are doing better than urban communities. So you can see that the problem is not just about flooding, rainfall, or climate change, but there are a lot of other, non-climate factors. It means that, and many of these factors are rooted beyond the community boundary, even at the city level or even at the national level. Meaning that when we want to support communities, we need to go beyond community physical boundary for our assessment, but also for our intervention. Sometimes we need to work with the national government to improve some problem at the community, or we need to improve, urban planning in the city to support some specific group. The other thing is we need to really understand what are the main drivers of risk and vulnerability and address this problem, and not just about looking at, for example, being a new and bigger drainage system or higher dike. I mentioned about the impact of urbanization. I mentioned about the impact of land subsidence. I mentioned about the impact of the poor management of urban waste. All these factors need to be addressed when we want to work on flooding. The last but not least important point is about the need to be prepared for unexpected situation. We have a lot of capacity and experience dealing with normal flooding, I would say. It means that the flooding that happened, that follow the historical trend and pattern. But now, things is changing, both because of climate change, but also because of, social economic development, urbanization. So we need to really prepare for that, so that we can better dealing with, uncertainty. I have some example about, the intervention that we are doing in the countries, from the local level, community level, to provincial, city level, but also to the national level. I don't have time to talk in depth about it, but I'm happy to talk later if someone are interested. Thank you for your attention. Yeah.
Thank you, Dr. Kanton Fu. So I think that we are on time. So yeah, we are concluding this session, and I really appreciate all the very good attention from the audience. Thank you very much. Thank you.